Hi, welcome back. So today I want to talk about leasehold estate. So remember from our earlier videos, we said that leasehold is going to be a tenant. We also said that leasehold is also a co-op because you don't own the property. So a leasehold is going to be someone that has to sign a lease. So that's the easiest way to remember it for the exam, is that leasehold is going to be a tenant or someone that owns a co-op, because both of them have to sign a lease. And today we're going to go over what is a lessor, what is a lessee. We're going to talk about estate at sufferance. We're going to talk about a periodic estate. We're going to talk about a month-to-month estate, and we're also going to talk about an estate for years. So let's begin. So we're talking about leasehold estate. So remember, it has the word lease in there. A tenant signs a lease, a co-op owner signs a lease. Later on in like chapter 19, we're still in chapter 5. This is the first video for chapter 5. We are discussing the tenant. So the tenant is also called a lessee, right? Because they sign a lease. So remember that I told you guys in the earlier videos that you're going to come across a lot of terminology that's going to end with EE and OR. And I said the easiest way to remember is that EE is receiving. So the lessee, who's the tenant, is receiving the apartment. OR, which is the lessor, right? That's the landlord. The landlord is giving possession. Now, that possession expires when the lease expires. So remember, the tenant doesn't own anything, right? That's the reason why they're under a leasehold, just like a co-op owner does not own anything. Neither one will have a deed or title in their name. So that's the reason why it's called a leasehold estate. So the four estates that I want to talk about, the first one, all pretty familiar with, is an estate for years. An estate for years is a leasehold estate that terminates automatically. Think of like when you go on vacation, right? And you book a hotel or Airbnb. You don't have to go back to the front desk and let them know that you're leaving, because when you booked your reservation in advance, you booked it for specific dates. So that is an estate for years. The key thing I need you guys to remember is that it terminates automatically. Even today, most hotels, you don't even have to go back to the front desk, right? Outside of you having some charges to the room, more than likely, you just can even take the key with you because they're going to demagnetize the card anyway. So that's an estate for years. So I need you to remember that the lease terminates automatically. So hotel, Airbnb. The next one I want to talk about, which is the one that we're most familiar with, is a periodic estate. A periodic estate, this is the second leasehold that we're referring to. The reason why we're most familiar with that one is because for those of us that lived in an apartment and we were tenants ourselves, you had a move-in date, which was your beginning date, and then you had your move-out date. So that's why it's called a periodic estate, because it has a beginning date and an end date. Another thing I want to state about a periodic estate is that it's a leasehold estate that automatically renews itself for successive tenancy unless one party terminates it. So let me say that again. Periodic estate, it is a leasehold estate that automatically renews itself unless one of the two parties, either the landlord or the tenant, terminates the lease. Now, in the state of New York, you would have to give a 30-day notice. So if the tenant wants to move out, they will give a 30-day notice. Or if the landlord wants the tenant to move out, the landlord is required to give a 30-day notice for the state of New York. So a periodic estate, what it means by it will automatically renew itself is, think about it. Let's say you have a lease from January 1st of 2019 to January 1st of 2020. If for whatever reason, you as a lessee, the tenant, does not sign a brand new lease, what happens? Your periodic lease renews itself and goes right into what? a month-to-month lease, which is the third leasehold estate that we're going to discuss. So a month-to-month lease is a lease that no one has given any indication that they either want you to move out or that the tenant wants to stay. So your periodic lease, which was for a year, typically they're for a year, but you can have leases for 2 years. Once that expires and there's no renewal of a lease, you cannot be evicted without the landlord giving you a 30-day notice. So that's the reason why I said earlier that a periodic lease will automatically renew itself, but it doesn't renew itself into another periodic lease. It's going to renew itself into a month-to-month lease. What is a month-to-month lease? Well, it's a leasehold estate that may terminate by either party. And we said earlier that as long as either side, either the tenant or the owner or landlord, submits a 30-day notice that you need to move out, that's the only thing that can terminate, just like with a periodic lease, that will terminate a month-to-month lease. Of course, with the periodic estate, you have guarantee, you have a written guarantee that your rent is not going to fluctuate, it's not going to increase. But with a month-to-month lease, you have to be careful, right? Because either you need to decide if you want to stay and make sure that you are able to sign a new lease, or submit your 30-day notice that you're going to move out. Because with the month-to-month lease, it's what it is. Your rent could be $3,000 for a studio, and then the next month, the landlord or property management association or owner can now say, you know what, for the next month, it's going to be $3,300. So that's the difference between the month-to-month as well as the periodic estate. Another thing too is that if you're an investor and you are not so sure about a particular tenant that you want to move into your property, sometimes investors will have them sign either a 6-month lease or maybe a 3-month lease, just like as a trial. Because those leases, if someone is signing a 3-month lease or a 6-month lease, it's much easier to evict a tenant on those leases. As you can see, with the month-to-month lease, there's a lot of risk. You have to worry about an increase in rent, as well as it's much easier to evict you on a month-to-month lease. Now, the fourth and final leasehold estate that I want to discuss is an estate at sufferance. So an estate at sufferance is when a tenant occupied the property lawfully, but their lease had expired. And remember earlier I said that the landlord or tenant needs to give a 30-day advance notice that they want you to move out. So an estate at sufferance is a scenario where the tenant had lawful possession, because if they didn't have lawful possession in the beginning, then that means that they were trespassing. So this is a tenant that had a periodic estate. That periodic estate expired. The landlord or owner notified the tenant 30-day advance notice that they wanted them to move out, but the tenant chose not to move out. So that is an estate at sufferance. Of course, or another name that you may see in your textbook is a holdover tenant. So that's a scenario where now the owner or landlord has justification to implement an eviction. And later on, we're going to discuss the 2 different types of evictions. If you have any questions in regards to the different types of leasehold estates, please leave it in the comments. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, so that more people will be able to have access to this content like yourself. I want to make sure that everybody is able to just watch the playlist and go through their whole entire textbook so that you can get out there and start making money in real estate. Thank you. Thanks again for coming to our channel. We look forward to continuing to help you and guide you through your real estate book. We are currently doing a New York real estate sales book, but later on we will follow with California sales book, Florida sales book, as well as New Jersey sales book. So look forward to those videos. One of the other things that we want to also discuss in the channel is investment, because most real estate professionals out there, they never get to learn about investment at their firm. So we want to talk about foreclosures, what type of properties you should buy. So don't forget to like and subscribe and share the video so that you'll be notified when we drop those videos. We're trying to drop at least a minimum of 3 videos per week, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video. Thank you.